Hello everyone and welcome back to Love Notions YouTube channel. I'm Whitney with TomKat Stitchery, and not only am I a Love Notions ambassador, which I love doing, but I'm also a sewing content creator here on YouTube under TomKat Stitchery, as well as on Instagram and Facebook, also under TomKat Stitchery. Those are the places you can find me where I love talking about all things sewing. And today we're going to be having a little bit of a discussion on how fabric can affect the feel of a garment on our bodies. Not necessarily fit, and I will define, I think a lot of people assume it's the fit, changes the fit of the actual garment, which is a little bit of a fallacy, and I'll explain why, but it can absolutely affect the feel of a garment on our bodies, and also how choosing fabric can change the way a garment looks and wears on our body. So it may impact choosing which fabric, depending on what final garment that we are actually envisioning in our head. Honestly, fabric selection can really make or break a project because we have a picture in our head of how we want something to look, and picking the wrong fabric can a lot of times cause that not to happen. So we're going to be talking all things fabric, specifically with the Love Notions Aria Button Down shirt, which, if you're watching this video today on April 4th, 2025, is today's Feature Friday pattern, which means it is on big sale, and you absolutely want to grab this one before today is over if you are watching this on the 4th, 2025. The Aria is one of my favorite shirts. I love a button-up shirt. It is one of my favorite types of silhouettes to sew, but also to wear. It really sings with my aesthetic. But the Aria not only comes in like your standard shirt with the long sleeves and the cuff and the tower placket and the collar and collar stand and all of that, but it also has versions of a dress, which is adorable, that you can make with or without a elastic cinched in waist. You can make it sleeveless. You can make it short sleeved. It features a yoke here on the back with a pleat, which gives a lot of extra really room, a lot of comfortable, and a little bit more of a relaxed button-up shirt. So really my kind of go-to shirt pattern, and if you don't have it in your catalog already, I highly recommend you go and grab that. I do have a link for the pattern down below in the description box. All right, let's talk about fabric. And I have got two versions of the Aria here sewn up in two different fabrics, and we're going to talk about how to pick our fabric, things we might want to consider when picking our fabric, both for design and wearing ease. But I'm saying ease not as in extra added to the garment, but ease as in making it easy to wear. That got a little confusing because those words could be gone either way on that. All right, so let's first talk a little bit about fiber versus weave. So fiber is the plant, the man-made compound, the protein that is used to make the thread that makes our fabric, whether that's knitted or woven. So this would be things like linen or cotton or rayon or polyester, silk. That is the fiber that goes into our fabric. And this does have an effect of how things can lay on our bodies, the drape and the body that fabric might have, and I'll define that here in just a second as well. But that does play a part in how a garment feels and wears on the body. The second thing to consider when we're talking about fabric is the weave. So this is how those threads have been woven or knitted, if you're talking about a stretch fabric, into certain patterns or designs. Sometimes they're woven really tightly, which can affect how a fabric hangs or lays on the body. Sometimes they are woven a little bit looser, which can also affect how a garment hangs or lays. The thickness, the weave a lot of times will determine the thickness of a fabric as well. Obviously, the thread width, the size of thread that a manufacturer is using will also determine how thin or thick a fabric might be as well. But those are the two things that we want to take into consideration. So, for example, cotton twill is a cotton fiber woven in a twill weave. And when we look at a twill weave, it looks kind of diagonal, which creates a fabric that has a lot of body or structure. So when I say body, I mean fabric. It is how far a fabric will stand away from your body. So it has a lot of structure. So a fabric with a lot of body is going to stand further away from our bodies. That also gets confusing, doesn't it? When we have the English language, it's so confusing. But because it has more structure, it's not going to follow the curves as much. A lot of times it can kind of tint out, or maybe just keeps its silhouette of the pattern that you are using, which can be fantastic. When you're wanting to make a pair of jeans that have a structured leg on them, you absolutely want something with more structure because you want it to hold that shape. If you are making a button-up shirt, case in point, and you want it to be a little bit more tailored and a little bit more crisp, you absolutely want to use a fabric that has a bit more structure. Now, what fabrics or what fibers and weaves tend to have a little bit more body that might make a garment a little bit more tailored and structured? Your typical ones are going to be cotton and linen. There are others, but when we are looking at the grand scheme of fabrics, and not to overwhelm, cotton and linen are going to be your two fibers that really have a lot of structure. If you are making a button-up shirt, cotton lawn, cotton poplin, cotton broadcloth, those are all fantastic cottons to use for a crisp and structured shirt. I am going to be showing some footage of me in this shirt so that you can kind of see the difference between the two. So what does it mean when something has a lot of structure? How does that affect the fit? So like I mentioned, it does mean that the fabric holds its structure a little bit, so it makes it a little bit more tailored. It makes those collars a little bit more crisp, those cuffs a little bit more crisp. It is a fantastic option to use when you are wanting a little bit more of that classic look. When we are working with natural fibers, such as linen and cotton, these can be very comfortable to wear in the summertime. They breathe really well. A garment like this isn't going to hold a lot of moisture. Technically, cotton does hold on to moisture, but when you've got a nice loose garment like this, it just allows air to move through easily, making it very comfortable to wear in warmer months. Which is why you see these fabrics most often when you're talking about clothing for the spring and summer. So in addition to a fabric with body or structure, in addition to that holding these nice crisp lines, it can also mean that when we are moving around in things, it can feel just a little bit more constricting. So for instance, if you have, using the word ease, as in the difference between our body measurement and the measurement of the garment, if you have a minimal amount of ease, so if you're making a fitted shirt, for instance, this one is more relaxed, but if you're making a shirt that has multiple darts, you know, in the front as well as in the back, waist darts, and is a little bit more fitting closer to the body, you are going to feel that it fits closer to the body in a more structured fabric, because the structured fabric also doesn't have the mechanical give. It doesn't have, when you're moving around, it can feel maybe just a little bit tighter on the arms. Not that the fit is wrong. That is something that I want to clarify. If you have a pattern that you have gotten to fit your body really well, you do not need to fit it differently for different fabrics. You just need to be aware that different fabrics are going to feel different on your body. Sometimes, if we are using a fabric with more drape and more give, we may not notice that the bust is just a little too tight, where we would notice it in the more structure like a cotton or a linen. In this case, yeah, you may want to do an extra full bust adjustment or go up a little bit of a size or add a little, you know, let the side seams out a little or whatever the case may be. But just know that you can use the same pattern for all your fabrics. Just be aware of the way that they might feel a little bit different, or the ways that they may, when you're moving, be a little bit more constricting. Not a bad thing, just something to be aware of. So your more structured fabrics are going to feel a little bit, and I say constricting, and it doesn't mean that this is necessarily a bad thing, because when we are tucking our shirts in and stuff and we want a nice crisp look, you want that feeling because you want things to stay in place and you don't want them to be fluid. You want that tailored, structured look. So that is when we would choose a fabric such as a linen or a cotton that has a little bit more structure. Now, on the flip side to this, we have fabrics that have more drape. So drape is going to be, it usually is indicated by the weight of the fabric, but also the fiber and weave come into play with this as well. For instance, this fabric that I've used here is a rayon, actually a rayon twill, but it's a lightweight rayon twill. A lot of times we associate twill with bottom weight, but this is a lightweight that is more appropriate for shirts, dresses, maybe a skirt, that sort of thing. Fabric with drape means when it goes on top of the body, it collapses in on itself. This is a rayon crepe that I'm wearing here, so it hugs the curves just a little bit more. Even though this is not a tight-fitting shirt, it stands away from my body, but it still falls in on itself, so you can see a little bit more of my body underneath, especially when I move. You know, it doesn't tint out away, you know, off my bust, it falls in. So again, a wonderful option if that's the kind of look that you're wanting to go for. Typically fabrics with a lot of drape are ones that are made of a rayon or a viscose. Now, rayon and viscose are the same thing, interchangeable, just two different words for the same thing. They are made from a natural product that has gone through a man-made process. So when making the rayon or viscose fiber, it is most times wood cellulose that has gone through a chemical process in order to create thread. The same as when you see lyocell or tencel. Those are a little bit more environmentally friendly in that they're using recycled chemicals and that sort of thing. Bamboo, any of that has had to go through some sort of a process to turn it into a thread. So it's kind of a hybrid between a man-made and a natural fiber. Rayon viscose also breathes really, really well because it does start off as that natural component that's there in that. But it also makes a very heavy fabric. So if you were to hold up a yard of rayon challis in one hand versus a yard of silk charmeuse in the other, your rayon challis is going to feel quite a bit heavier than the silk, even though they drape very similarly. In fact, rayon was meant to be a replacement for silk back in the war when we had to ration and all of that sort of thing. So it's because it is a heavy fiber, it falls in on itself and it drapes really lovely. So even the weaves that tend to be a little bit more structured, such as a twill, they still have a lot more drape than their twill, like cotton twill counterparts, if that makes sense. These can be wonderful if you're wanting less of a tailored shirt, but more of a blouse type option. Similarly, if you're wanting to tuck it in, but you're wanting a little bit of a softer look, you want something that doesn't stand away from the body, that hugs the curves a little bit more, choosing a fabric with drape can be a lovely, lovely option. Same pattern was used on these shirts. The only difference is that I shortened this shirt an inch at the waist, which is a common fit adjustment I have to make. I'm only 5'2" and I have a very short torso. So with Love Notions patterns, I always raise the waist by an inch so that it hits my waist. I have done that on this pattern. I did not do that on this one because I wanted this to be just feeling a little bit more oversized. Because I was using a crisper fabric, I knew that I wanted a little bit more of an oversized feel, which is what I was going for with this shirt. Whereas this one, I wanted it to be a little bit more like a blouse. So something that I will probably tuck into pants, maybe wear open, but in a looser, beachier kind of type feel, if that makes sense. So when picking fabric, not only is it important to consider the fiber and what it's going to do, if it's going to fall in on the body or stand away from the body, and determining what you want out of your shirt, but also taking into consideration that weave as well. Most of the time, linen just comes as linen. You don't see as many different weave options for linen. It's usually just lightweight linen, midweight linen, or heavyweight linen. But when you come to your cottons or your rayons or your silks, you're going to see a lot of different weaves that are out there. And my favorites are your rayon challis, your rayon crepes, again, viscose and rayon being interchangeable. If you want to go a silk route, silk crepe, silk charmeuse, make beautiful shirts. If you're wanting to go a little bit more structured, like I said, your linen, your cotton poplins, your cotton lawn. Cotton lawn's probably my favorite to make button-up shirts out of. Cotton gauze, the double gauze that's really big right now, can give a really interesting effect. And that actually tends to fit a little bit looser than your cotton lawns, because it is a very open weaved fabric. It's not a tightly woven fabric. And because you have those two layers that are attached together there in the middle, it just has a lot of mechanical give. It can be very comfortable, makes a great oversized shirt. But those are the types of fabrics that I would be looking at if I were making a shirt, and I can often be found making shirts because they are some of my absolute favorites to make. Hopefully, this will help you make choosing your fabric for your next button-up shirt a little bit easier. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. We're happy to answer those. And if you'd like to follow me over on all the different social medias, please find me on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm TomKat Stitchery on YouTube, and TomKat Stitchery Carmel on Instagram and Facebook. And I've got all that linked down below. And I would love to chat with you all more about sewing. Have a good Friday, and I'll see you guys next time.